All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Command It webinars series that Command It produces every month. This is our April webinar. We're so excited to have everyone join us today for our topic, Imposter Syndrome in Computer Science, a community-engaged conversation. Today, we're excited to have a beautiful panel of people that I will allow our moderator to introduce. We're excited to have experts and people with genuine and authentic perspectives to share today. We do want to let you know that the chat is always open for all questions throughout. We will be monitoring all together, and we'll make sure to get to as many questions as we can throughout this conversation. It is my honor to be a part of the LEAP Alliance. My name is Tamika. I am the Senior Program Manager for the LEAP Alliance, which is a Command It program. Within the LEAP Alliance, we have several cohorts that meet weekly. We have a subcommittee called the Imposter Syndrome Subcommittee that has worked together to bring this webinar to you today. And so I want to recognize our subcommittee today. Some of the members will be in attendance. Some of the members of the subcommittee are Tom Hurst, Michelle Lane, Osik Ike, Tiffany Grimsley Vasquez, myself, and our moderator for today, Dr. Corina Hernandez. And it is my privilege to introduce to you Dr. Corina Hernandez today. She will be leading our webinar as the moderator, and she'll be introducing our lovely panel. Dr. Corina Hernandez is the Assistant Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Computer Science Department at Princeton University. Corina is also a lecturer for Knowledge and Power, Issues in Women's Leadership through the Department of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Rutgers University. She is an EOF graduate, and it looks like I skipped ahead on my slide deck. She is an EOF graduate of Kean University, where she earned both her bachelor's and master's degrees in public administration before completing her doctorate in education at the Rutgers Graduate School of Education. Her current research examines the experiences of undergraduate Black and Latina women in computer science. We are honored to have Corina with us today, and at this time, I would like to turn the webinar over to our moderator, Dr. Corina Hernandez. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamika, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for being here and for being willing to engage in what I think will be a really thoughtful and honest conversation this afternoon. Thank you again to Tamika, our panelists, Command It, for making this virtual gathering possible. As Tamika mentioned, my name is Dr. Corina Hernandez, currently serving as the Assistant Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Princeton University's Computer Science Department. I would like to preface this opening with the fact that we only have 1 hour to talk about a really large and complex topic. So we surely won't get to explore every single aspect of this topic, but we really do hope to scratch the surface and more importantly, plant seeds of change into each person who's listening today on the call. Today we're talking about something that many people in computing recognize immediately when they hear the term, even if they've never said it out loud, which is imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. Imposter syndrome is often described as the persistent feeling that you do not belong in a space, that your accomplishments are somehow accidental, or that at any moment someone will quote unquote discover that you are not as capable as others to do the work that you're doing. In fields like computer science, there are brilliance myths, competitive cultures, narrow ideas of who looks like a technologist, and these have historically shaped the environment, and they can be particular powerful feelings in our departments, as we know. But I want to start by reframing something. Imposter syndrome is usually described as individual experience, something that happens at the individual psychological level, but it's also deeply connected to environment, to culture, to society. So the question that we should be thinking about is not only why people feel imposter syndrome, but what are the signals that our institutions, our departments, communities, society is sending about who belongs in the field and who does not belong in the field. So in other words, imposter syndrome does not happen in a vacuum. It emerges in environments where historical narratives, cultural assumptions, and structural inequalities exist, and they really shape who is capable. We know this is true on our campuses, right? Women, students of color, queer students, first-gen students, students with different abilities, they often experience imposter syndrome and what scholars call this phenomenon of onlyness, being the only person of your identity in a space, whether that's a classroom, a lab, can really change the dynamics of what happens in that space. And for those of us who've experienced this, we know it can heighten our visibility while simultaneously undermining our sense of belonging. And these small moments really do accumulate. In my own research, I spent some time with Black and Latina undergraduates at Rutgers University, and nearly all of them talked about some form of microaggressions or feeling that sort of onlyness phenomenon, which really directly impacted their confidence levels. There are numerous studies that are out there that look at women, students of color in the field of higher education, but particularly in computing. One of the recent studies that I found while preparing for this was a study that looked at the prevalence of imposter syndrome among computer science students, undergraduates, and researchers found that 71% of women have these feelings over 52% of men. So we know this is happening, right? There are many speculations as to why this happens. There are long, powerful narratives about a quote unquote genius programmer, someone who codes effortlessly or who started programming at the age of 12, or someone who solves problems alone at 3 a.m. And we know that these sort of myths and these stories are embedded in our students. If you grow up without access to computing resources, or if you entered in computer science later than your peers, maybe you're first generation, or maybe you're navigating spaces where people are questioning your, identity, your race, gender, background. The gap between those myths and your lived experience can feel really enormous. And we know that this matters, right? Because computer science is not only about technical knowledge, that's a very large part of it, but it's also about confidence and confidence to participate, permission to experiment, and your willingness to take intellectual risks in the classroom and beyond. When someone feels like an imposter, they might hesitate to ask questions, to share ideas, or pursue opportunities that can help them grow. But before we get into it, I want to offer one more reframing, and it's that imposter syndrome can coexist and often does coexist with high achievement. Many of the people who feel like imposters are actually among the most capable in the room. Their self-doubt does not reflect a lack of ability. It instead reflects the cultural messages that they may have absorbed about who is able to exceed in the field. So again, imposter syndrome often does coexist with high achievement. CS has made enormous strides over the past couple of decades, and organizations like the Commanded Organization, the LEAP Alliance, set to address these disparities. There's also an organization called Access Computing, which supports students with disabilities in computing. And there are a number of professional organizations that value research and impactful pedagogies that allow more students into the field. And we know with all of that work and all that great research that underrepresentation is still a huge problem in our communities. And if there's one thing that these conversations reveal, and that I hope that you can take away from this today, is that many people, even many people on this call, students, faculty, professionals at every level, have felt like imposters at some point in their career. When I was preparing for this webinar and, Tamika asked me to moderate, I even had these thoughts. I'm like, what do I know? Why did they ask me to moderate? I have no idea what I'm talking about. When the truth is, we belong in these spaces, we belong having these conversations because we really want to make a difference in our fields. So the purpose of this community engaged conversation is to rethink how we can support students facing imposter syndrome on our campus. Departments play a huge role, faculty play a huge role, staff, and even peers in the department play a huge role. So we want to, be in this space in a community setting where we can have these honest and open conversations so we can make changes on our campus. So I would like to now turn to sort of the expertise of our panelists. I'm going to have each panelist introduce themselves, and then I'm going to just circle back to our first panelist for the first question. So Simone, can I please have you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Simone Warwick Bell. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I work as the graduate academic counselor for the graduate school at University of Maryland, College Park. Essentially, in my role, I do wellness programs. I support students who are on leave, and I also collaborate with other campus partners for programming or different efforts.
Thank you, Simone. I will turn it over to LeeAnn.
Hi, everyone. My name is LeeAnn Roberts, and I currently serve as the Director for Belonging at Bowers within Cornell University. And while in this role, I primarily serve faculty, staff, and students and support their sense of belonging, obviously, in the title, and also think about how I can support their professional, academic, and personal development. So, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, LeeAnn. I will turn it over to Gillian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gillian. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at Princeton in the computer science department. My specialty is in computational biology, so it's not not at all related to, I think, the topics perhaps that we're going to discuss today. But I do co-lead the mentorship program at Princeton, and I have a lot of thoughts about imposter syndrome. So I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Thank you. I think we have a wealth of knowledge in this space, and I think we're all going to be able to provide something that our guests can take away. So Simone, I'd like to start with you with our first question. How best would university personnel at a department level working with students effectively overcome the gap of organizational distance while identifying and resolving imposter syndrome issues? And I will put that put that question in the chat as well.
Sure. In thinking about this question, I thought about it in kind of three spaces. So one of which is like student, the other one is kind of campus community, and then kind of like the intermingling, of student and campus community. So essentially, graduate students, typically grad students and undergraduate students have access to resources in a sense of you have access to supportive resources like a counseling center or a health center, or depending on someone's campus, they have a full integrated system. You have all those things, they exist, that is beneficial, but it's not enough. Students oftentimes have to kind of engage in practices that can affirm themselves, whether that's through affirmations or different things around that. In addition to that, you also have kind of the big advice that I always encourage everyone that comes to a university or college, whether it be grad or undergrad, is to have some idea of a social support network. Even with all those things, students can feel a bit out of place. They can feel a bit like, do I belong here? When I was in graduate school 100 years ago, essentially, I very much was like, they admitted the wrong Simone Livingston, and they're going to find me. Warwick Bell is my married name, but they admitted the wrong Simone Livingston, and they're going to eventually discover it. And they didn't mean to do it, but they're just too deep in it. They don't want to admit the lie. This is a hard thing to shake, but I think there are different things that a university can do to kind of bridge that gap in terms of support, identification, and finding a resolution. I want to kind of focus on some of the things that we have done at UMD. So I came into grad school in 2020, and talking to grad students, you encounter a lot of people who have imposter syndrome. This is not necessarily something that is cultivated solely from anxious thoughts. Sometimes this is rooted in experiences of being left out or isolated or kind of overlooked in certain classes or spaces. I've heard this happening with multiple students. So in thinking about this, I had two ideas around what can we do to combat this. One thing I did was I launched a wellness course. A wellness course is like a part of one of my wellness programs. Essentially, the course is a two-part session. Each session is 1 hour. And I connected with a psychologist in the counseling center at University of Maryland. I said, hey, do you want to do an imposter session? I think it'd be super great. This would be great for our Black students, our students of color, our first-gen students, or some of our students who are kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm here and I want to be here, but I also feel like I'm a big phony. The class is one of my most popular things. Typically when I kick off the wellness programs, it's scheduled at the beginning of the semester, and every time it is almost 50 people who register. And I'm always happy to share this with students and share like the slides of folks who come. That's one thing I've done, but also kind of on the flip side and thinking about having a community. So having a connection with people who may be in a similar situation. I developed the Eat, Grow, and Learn session. This is a series really dedicated to students who create community intentionally or to find connections. So pre everything happening within the federal government, the sessions were geared towards this is a session for women or femme or women identifying students. We had sessions that were geared towards BIPOC students. We had sessions that were geared to Asian American, Pacific Islander students, and our Indigenous students. And that was always welcome. And just to have a space to like come eat a meal. And this is low structured, but this is a chance for you to connect. And then we have that session still going on. We kind of change the topics in a way that the population may be a little bit more niche in that we did a session that was geared towards supporting your relationship and or marriage while in graduate school. And we had couples counselors come in. This is meeting a kind of maybe if you're a parent or if you have children that you're caring for that are not necessarily your biological or adopted children, but you're kind of in the space of like, I want to sustain my care for these children while also kind of having this solid relationship with my partner and my spouse. So what we did was we had a session that was geared towards like, let's talk about that. We opened it up to grad students. They could come with their partner, and they could bring their kids too. This session was incredibly popular. We did it on a Friday night, and people came and had pizza and talked, and they also felt really affirmed in that, oh, I have someone else who's in the same experience as me. A lot of this is affirming experiences. If I had the bandwidth and more time, I'm a unit of one. But if I had the bandwidth and more time, some of the things that I think campuses could do in terms of faculty, staff, and student involvement in that intersection would be potentially developing kind of a mentorship or a Big Littles program around folks who have imposter syndrome or have experienced it, while also thinking about opportunities to connect students to resources that might be helpful. If there's something that already exists, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but maybe we can build upon it. I think the main thing with faculty is they're aware that it happens, they're aware there are traditional supports, but what do we do when we see it happening in the lab? What do we do when we see it happening in the classroom or other places? Is there a way to kind of encourage that in terms of, hey, I notice you are not including this student. I want to restructure the group, so I'm going to split this group in half. Or I notice that you all seem to have this event, but there doesn't really seem to be an involvement of these other students. Can you speak to that a little bit more? And sometimes there are cultural factors in that someone say, oh, we go to happy hour, but we don't want to include the student because due to their faith, they don't consume alcohol. Then the suggestion of the faculty might be, well, instead of going to happy hour, would you be open to doing something else, such as, going golfing or doing something that isn't solely reliant on alcohol consumption? Other cool things that I would love to do is to have like a class around this and it'd be a 1 credit class for folks so they could learn how to overcome imposter syndrome. And then potentially have like a cross-functional identification kind of thing with faculty and staff where there could be an org specifically for this and have services kind of align that and support. This could be like a nomination and more of a collaboration between like student government, Office of Faculty Affairs, graduate faculty, as well as potentially student affairs org, such as, at Maryland we have graduate student life. But that's something that I would think would be great in time. But I think there are a lot of opportunities that people can build bridges within the campus community and with students to help resolve this issue. So I want to be mindful of time. So yes, that's my response.
Thank you. Thank you, Simone. So many good pieces there. I mean, I think you ended off with like a really important one, which is this cross-functional identification and collaboration, right? This is not just sort of your health services or mental health services issue. This is an issue that happens within academic departments, and it's important that we're all sort of aware of how to address that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to turn over to our student panelist, Gillian. What role have mentors, advocates, or peers played in helping you overcome imposter syndrome? What worked and what didn't work?
Thanks, Corina. I went to a really, really large undergrad. Classes were like, it was a state school. Classes maybe had like 2,000 students in them. And that's not an exaggeration, unfortunately. And so I think uh, the role of the role of mentors, peers, and like advocates. I'm going to like address each of these like separately. So I think mentors, it took me a long time in undergrad to figure out how to seek out the mentors that were going to be the right ones for me. I think especially when you're feeling like so sort of like one in a sea of many, it can be very, very difficult to, you know, stand out, to make yourself like to keep the right like positive mindset, to not sort of like slip into this like either inferiority complex or, on the flip side, be around a lot of people who are bringing some negative energy and reinforcing that competitive spirit. So I do think that, it took some time, but I found some really wonderful mentors. There's like a specific example where I remember I was a junior in undergrad and I was sitting in on a graduate class and I had just gone out of interest, but I ended up being the only girl in like the whole room and I didn't go back because I was feeling iffy about being in that class anyway. And the professor actually wrote to me and encouraged me to stay in the class. And again, like I went to a large state school. You have to understand that that was like unheard of. I didn't understand how he like knew my name or like had picked me out of a roster. Um, it's probably because I was the only girl in the class, and so he could just go down the roster and look. But like that, I think like is one example of, something that the professor did that he really didn't have to do. But that like made me feel like, oh, like I'd not never been thinking about grad school before, but like, what if I thought about grad school as an option? Um, there were other really wonderful mentors, and I think I like had to break out of this echo chamber in my head to seek out those mentors. Um, the really like crucial point for me was that these people, these professors, like I like wrote to many professors and I asked to do research with them, and most professors don't write back. But you like keep trying. And I found professors who demonstrated trust in me. They like gave me a project and they gave me independence and met with me and they invested time and energy into me. And I think that that was like really sort of like life-changing in the sense that I definitely would not be in grad school if I hadn't like kept looking for these people. Um, and those are the people who sort of like helped me to learn to have trust in myself and to build up confidence, the good kind of confidence. Um, and so, to the extent that like you just have to like email like more and more people and you have to keep seeking out the mentors, I very much believe that, you're going to have like different mentors for different parts of your life, and you're going to have different mentors for different aspects of your life, and no one person is necessarily like everything that you need. But that's also why it's like important to keep having conversations and meeting people. Um, so yes, I think like the crucial thing for me is like when a professor or someone you look up to greatly like demonstrates some kind of trust in you, that is like something that can like, really inspire like a change in mindset. And it did that for me. I think it's also been really, really important to have friends by my side who really like I feel and believe that they are so wholeheartedly on my side. I know I'm like very lucky in this, and I think I really found that in grad school. So I've been very lucky in that. But the friends, like they're the ones who help me like positively reframe and look for instances of people demonstrating trust and preserving like those interactions and keeping a positive mindset and confidence is like very important, especially because grad school is a long time. So um, things are just easier if you can approach things positively. And um, even if there was like a period of time in grad school where I was feeling extremely negative about, um, the relationship with like people who were in charge of me and things like that. And I think feeling negatively about that and looking like that was sort of like reinforcing. Like if I keep looking for negative examples, I'm just going to keep seeing negative examples. And so let's try and also pay attention to the positive examples as well. Um, there's like maybe one last thing. I don't know how long I've been talking, but um, at the end of my first year of grad school, I suffered a head injury and I took about 6 months to recover. And of course, everyone's journey is different, especially with head injuries. But I think for me, that was almost freeing in some regards. I realized that a huge problem for me were these expectations I had of myself. And when I hit my head and I had to relearn how to do things like adding numbers and logic, well, you can't really have expectations for yourself. Like, being able to like add numbers in like within a minute is like pretty great. So and this was right before I took my candidacy exam. So my advisor was supportive, but in the sense that like he was like, we'll just delay and like, you'll take some time. But I just like kept repeating to myself that like you can't learn things that you think you already know. And like keeping this sort of mantra and again, like having positive people around me. And having an advisor who was like okay with me, like sort of taking some time off to recover, all of these things are helpful. Okay, that's everything for me.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you. I think something that stuck out to me that you had mentioned was like the professor who emailed you to stay in the class and just having someone who puts a little trust in you and give you some independence. And these are really good examples of small things, right? Like when we think of attacking this problem of imposter syndrome, we don't always have to build a new program or throw hundreds of thousands of dollars at something. It's like these powerful small acts that really stick with students. And I just appreciate you bringing that into this space. Okay, we're going to sort of shift over to our next panelist, LeeAnn. How do we identify best practices from the campus or community and distribute the resources to the impacted students? And how have you been able to measure the effectiveness of your best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I believe the best practice that I have implemented here at Cornell is actually having listening tours, scheduling those with faculty, staff, and students, just learning from them about what the student experience is all about, asking the really hard questions that might make people uncomfortable in regards to, is it something that maybe we are doing as an institution or as a college that may be contributing to students feeling lacking a sense of belonging or feeling this imposter syndrome? What are we doing in our own capacities to address that publicly and privately in those different spaces? And so I say starting there. I think that many of us at times, make the mistake, especially me in my early career, of just assuming that we understand exactly what students are facing, even as the generations are changing, and we implement different programs, events, and services that we believe are helping them, that are not trauma-informed practices or maybe just textbook, without really just having valid conversations with the student body, faculty, and staff. And I feel like that has been really helpful, especially when you have senior faculty and staff who've been around for decades and can talk to you about how this have transitioned over time and what they have seen. So I feel like that's number one, is trusting in having hard conversations within your institutions and also with your partners like the LEAP Alliance, et cetera, and learning from them also, what are they seeing at their institutions? What are they hearing from their faculty, staff, and students? Even having conversations with corporate partners, I feel like is helpful as well. Our students who are interning, sometimes we don't see where the imposter syndrome show up. We believe most of the time it's with them in their role as a student. Students are multifaceted. They have jobs, they have employment, and sometimes that imposter syndrome actually surfaces outside of your campus, whether they're working like in a local community or in an internship. And so having conversations with them as well and being aware of what's going on with your student population, and where the pain points are. When we say imposter syndrome, where it hits, I think it's a good starting point. Next is actually investigating that. Sometimes our conversation stops there. We hear about what's working and what's not working, what the students are experiencing, but we may not have the bandwidth or time constraints, maybe around us, where we don't have time to kind of look into, okay, what were they really saying? Let me find out for myself about, what's happening. Like, let me talk to other students and see, or let me go to that particular office and figure out how they do what they do to support students that are experiencing imposter syndrome. Can I get, contact information of your corporate partners that have said these things so I can have a talk with them and discover a little bit about what's happening? Because a lot of times we can actually save funding, we can save financial resources when we're not duplicating efforts and we're actually understanding what pre-existing programs, events, and services are here, and tag in on that or collaborate in on that or expand that to a higher level. Sometimes those things are already there. I've also learned that digital platforms, I've noticed now, are helping students more than ever beyond institutions, that students are leveraging these digital platforms on their own for support, looking at AI, like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, are becoming their own therapists, whether we like it or not, whether it's positive or negative. I've seen a lot of students taking understanding and recognizing that, yes, I am dealing with imposter syndrome, and are empowering themselves with tools that are available to overcome that. So you see them engaging on TikTok and Twitter, etc. And whether it's old or new, because we're dealing with all different types of students, non-traditional students as well. And they are creating their own sources of support to kind of encourage themselves and to see other people make it and model to them that they have done it and have shared their identities and they can too. So I've also seen students do that. And so sometimes we can't always look at the lack of attendance in events or reduced attendance in certain sort of supplemental resources that we have. A lot of times some of the work is really happening behind the scenes. And so we can take a strength-based approach into how we're looking at addressing some of these issues on campus. So I would say that. The next thing is sharing resources, I feel like is important. But being thoughtful in how we're marketing those resources to our students. I think that when I have conversations with some of my students, and this is based on my own personal experience, I feel that, oh, it's on my website. I talk about it when I go to different events or when I work with student organizations, affinity-based student organizations. I feel that my message is out there. Not real, I think in putting it on the students really to drive that conversation even further, and some of my colleagues, faculty and staff, about this is what we have available across campus for, support related to like imposter syndrome or wellness, etc. But I don't follow up on that. And so I feel that we make that mistake sometimes of, oh, I did my due diligence. I had a couple of talks and we feel like it's happening. But there are some students that are sitting in that audience that are feeling like maybe this is not for me. Maybe the method that we're communicating these different resources, students are thinking, or the titles that we use in subjects, they're not even opening it. They're not even reading down on the page. They don't see themselves like in whatever pictures or videos that you're putting out there. Maybe it's the environment is too competitive, and it's embarrassing to be able to admit because of pride and ego and maybe culture that, hey, I'm dealing with something of this nature, and is it really safe for me to show up and be here? And now I'm exposed. And so I feel that it's important to kind of take a moment to think about your targeted audience, from undergrad to grad students. What do they need from traditional students to non-traditional students who are adult learners, like 25 and up? As undergraduates, like what is it that they need? What can reach them? What are some new methods? Like, can we just do a TikTok video on this? Like, can I get other students to do a dance or do something that's trending to kind of get everybody here? Can we show some pictures or images of people who are comfortable sharing their story or testimonials that may encourage others to do the same? So I feel like thinking about the different modes of communication, how we're communicating, pictures and images that we're utilizing, following up, I think when we're talking about word of mouth is helpful to kind of get that information out there. And I think leveraging our alliances as well too, whereas they may not want to hear it from me or my students, but through the LEAP Alliance and their newsletters and their emails and their webinars, and they may hear it from someone else, and that may click to ask them the question here, what are we doing? And I can say, yeah, I've been sharing all these different things, but I'm so glad you heard about it. I'm so glad you're asking me. So I feel that we just need to leverage our different relationships to kind of get that messaging and that word out there. So hopefully I answer that. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my God, so many good nuggets of information here. I'm just checking the chat. I don't see any questions coming in right now, but I maybe wanted to circle back to the group with kind of like a broad question of what are some of the signs and signals that a student might display when they're struggling with imposter syndrome? Because I think sometimes there's lots of signals students can give us, right? And sometimes those are mental health related, academic related, personal or social things that they may be going through. But in your own experiences, maybe LeeAnn, you can start. What are some of the signs and signals that you've seen?
Oh, yeah. So some of the signs and signals that I have seen is in how they appear in the space, how they carry themselves, take care of themselves, maybe like what's facing in front of you. So they may look depressed. they may look as if, they're, not taking care of their hair, etc. They're just going through life. Sometimes if you listen and instead of talking and you can hear the way they talk just naturally about themselves, I don't think I can do it. I'm scared, or I don't think anybody will be available. And you can just the negativity sometimes, the ones that are kind of they sometimes self-isolate. I can see that, like if I'm at events, etc., they may not feel like they fit in, that they belong. And you can kind of see that if you're not caught up in the energy of the space and you take your time to really look and see what's happening, you can see like, okay, maybe these are symptoms. It's not the same for everybody. There might be underlining issues that are going on that you mentioned, Corina, but it's a start to say, let me ask questions, let me see what is happening here. I would say absence, even in the classroom, is something we need to look at. Some risky behaviors. I've had students show up and they may have smelled like alcohol or drugs. I'm not trying to say everybody at Cornell is getting high. No, I'm not saying that by any means, but you can see that maybe students are leaning to different other substances to try to self-medicate or to try to numb different feelings that are happening. I've even seen an inflation, the opposite, and I'll pause and let someone else share their signs. An inflation of ego and pride. I'm the best and I'm so smart and all of this. And then when I go to look at their grades, it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite. And I've even seen them take on leadership positions, these students, etc. But deep down underneath all that is the high that I'm insecure. I really don't belong here. And they do more than what is actually normal. So people are not actually seeing what's underneath that. And I think it takes discernment and experience to be able to notice those things. And making sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can be able to see what someone else is going through and you're not projecting what's in you onto them. So I will pause.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if Simone or Gillian, if you would like to respond.
Just to kind of piggyback off that, I think there's a sense that like students can often like have concerns about taking up space. Whenever I get a message from a student, they say, "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you." I'm like, "It's my job. What can I do? Like, how can I help you?" Some of the other things that we've seen in students is kind of self-doubt, self-criticism, a fear of failure or a fear of success, perfectionism. For some students, there's this commitment of that, like if they don't do it exactly perfectly, then it's just, wrong and crap, and you should just start over, versus maybe just saying, this is maybe what it is for the time being. What is the room for improvement? And, being able to kind of, be open to kind of the constructive feedback we sometimes have. Um, as like my background is in mental health, so like, you will see students, of course, with depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and things like that. The main thing is that we just try to work with folks before they kind of cross the threshold of just kind of imposter syndrome and maybe kind of struggling with tendencies versus like a full-blown diagnosis. But those are some of the things that we've seen, and like common statements such as like, I'm a fraud, I don't belong here, I'm just lucky to be here, things like that, versus like actually stepping into ownership of that. I deserve to be here. I earned my spot versus like somehow I just plopped here. But we do see some of that with students.
Yeah, thank you.
I just
Go
want
ahead,
to add
Gillian.
something. I think a lot of the time, it's something that comes out maybe through conversation, and it's kind of a difficult thing to have like, one person, like it's not feasible to have one person talk to literally everybody, but perhaps like some kind of decentralized approach where, not everyone's going to feel comfortable talking to everybody, but making sure that people are checking in and have people that they can go to and talk to, and having, those like peer mentors or whatever else it might be, having those peer mentors understand like, sort of the symptoms that they should be looking for. So things like, if there's language like, yeah, I'm like just lucky to be here, or like, oh, I asked like a really stupid question today. And like using like sort of language that kind of puts themselves down, and then giving those mentors like the resources to sort of point them in the right direction or to help them positively reframe things like that. That kind of like decentralized approach might, also be very effective, especially because like students who are feeling. I don't want to make a generalizing statement, but it can be difficult to reach out and to sort of admit that, like, oh yeah, this is like how I'm feeling, and I need to seek out help, or I need to seek out resources that will help me change this. It's hard not to double down and be like, I just need to like work harder and I'll be better, and then like it'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know it is hard, but I think you offer an important point of reframing, and that's something that we can do as mentors and as people who just deal with imposter syndrome on a daily basis. I want to turn to some questions that are rolling in here. We have a wonderful, really thought-provoking question from Doreen that I hope we can speak to in some way that's useful. She says, as a woman in computer science and related fields, we understand the importance of nurturing the next generation of leaders. What are some practical strategies that we can use to help our kids, especially young girls, develop resilience, confidence in STEM at an early age, and how can we empower them to overcome imposter syndrome before it even takes hold? Oof, that's a big one. Anyone want to speak to that? How can we start them at a young age, really feeling empowered in these spaces?
So I used to do K through 12 programming, and we're starting to introduce that now, like within our college, computing and information science at Cornell. And so I used to do a train the trainer program with K through 12 teachers, and I had students as young as kindergarten in STEM, and as old as seniors. And with that programming, what we did, like for elementary students, we got books that centered women being in empowered roles, etc. And so I used to do rock and share reading with the young kids. And so I found that to be really helpful, telling them that they're smart, they can do it just at a very young age. Even when they're scared, and nervous, doing it with them and then telling them to try afters, I found it to be very helpful. We used to do a couple of, I don't know if you all are familiar with the SECME program. Maybe I can share some information in the chat with you, but we used to run something called SECME, which is kind of like a STEM competition in Florida. This is before I came to Cornell, and I used to organize that. And so there was different, again, elementary, middle, and high schools from around the state that would come to the University of Central Florida to actually engage in a STEM competition. And so for the middle school students, we actually had the teachers at the school, we taught them different kind of STEM activities for them to embed it into their curriculum and to create STEM clubs. And so that's when we started thinking about like SHIP junior chapters and like Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers or the National Black Engineering Society, I think NSBE, Society of Engineers, right? NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. There we go. Was another one we was thinking also about having these junior chapters where we can kind of have more than just a one-off touch point where it's K through 12 teachers came on our campus, but we had our students, college students that was there creating some sort of STEM club, but they would just have these different activities. So students in the classroom really showed promise, or even just an interest. The teachers would encourage them to do these after school programs where they would be encouraged and excited, about these different STEM endeavors. And I think that builds a level of confidence outside of the classroom, because it's one thing to be introduced to these different like math equations and chemistry and physics, especially when they're getting into high school. It's another thing to be able to apply it into something very fun and something very exciting to kind of motivate them to continue learning the things behind the scenes. Same thing with AI and ML. So I feel that encouragement, especially for young girls, I think really we should start in the home. Also, we did things with parents too. And I could do a whole session on this. So never mind. Let me just stop because I feel like I'm going on a rabbit trail. But I believe in a nutshell, it involves institutions having strong relationships with the K through 12 schools, also with parents, going to parent-teacher meetings, etc., talking with them about the importance of this, and then having resources that are available, working with student organizations and making sure we have consistent touch points, space where students are encouraged and supported, and working with Society of Women Engineers and Women in Computing at Cornell, and having these different activities where they are forums. And yeah, and they know they can do it and they can see it. And I would even say we even encourage them to even watch shows too, like Grey's Anatomy back in the day, where you see women in these powerful positions in STEM. And so they can see themselves, constantly in others. So I would encourage that.
Thank you. Yes, representation is so important. We know that makes a huge, huge difference. I mean, truly at every level. Simone or Gillian, did you want to add? I can move on to,
I have a small suggestion on an
yeah.
activity. I used to tutor like middle schoolers, and the curriculum we developed there, I think one of the activities that really worked for us at least, was having students sort of explain concepts to each other. So you'd pair them up and then like asking for the other student's perspective and making sure both people got time to like explain something and explain through how they were like if you have give them like a problem to do, explaining like their thinking through the problem, just hearing themselves like speak out loud was, I think, very helpful. And also was helpful when like someone doesn't understand like how you get to the solution, but you've talked through it, then like it surfaces the problems, and then you can talk through like how it is that you get to the right solution, things like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for offering that. I'm gonna probably maybe mush two questions together that are not so alike, but maybe our panelists can address the one that they feel sort of most comfortable. I think Michelle brings an important question about harm reduction. How do we think about that, and how do we reduce, harm to our students? And then Israel brings in a really important question, I'm assuming from a peer perspective, about what peers can do to address imposter syndrome? And are there any specific pedagogies that they recommend as they lead sessions and lead club meetings, or just their daily interactions with each other?
In reference to harm reduction, is this more in the lens of thinking of interventions or thinking in the event, like if you see someone who may be exhibiting symptoms or kind of on more of the riskier side? So LeeAnn had mentioned like how some students cope through substance use. It's like in the harm reduction lens around that. Just for clarification, Michelle, I guess it's a question to a question. So
Right. I guess in relation to students who are exhibiting potential risk, how do you deal with harm reduction for students who you are meeting with who seem to be in trouble?
I think the main thing, at College Park we have a campaign of see something, say something, do something. If you see students who are in trouble in the sense of they have maybe indicators of some level of distress, or maybe they come to talk with you and they have slurred speech, or you can tell like they're visibly high because like, their eyes are kind of bloodshot. I think the main thing of harm reduction is kind of empathetic support in that not judging, but also kind of checking in with them. Oftentimes people will say, well, if someone's in danger, you should immediately kind of like step in and do an intervention. But at the same time, if there is not a certain heightened level of risk, some students can take it in a sense of an overstep. And that's why I usually tell folks, like, get a temperature of the pool before you dive in. Talk with students, ask them, how are you? Are you okay? Like, what's going on? I noticed A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Are you open to receiving some help? What can I do? Of course, we have kind of the thought around students who may be a risk to themselves or others, which may require an immediate intervention. But I think like the first step is having conversations and also kind of understanding that it may be different in terms of interventions. It's not a one-all cure-all. So even like with hospitalizations, sometimes people hear the word suicide trigger warning and immediately think they have to go to the hospital versus like talk with them. Let's go to a place where they can be assessed. Even saying I'm thinking about it, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go straight to the hospital. You can have a conversation with them. The counseling center may be able, or your counseling entity on campus may be a great resource. Also, like with substance abuse, talking around training around substance use. I did a great training around marijuana usage and harm reduction of grad students last year. And it was really about like, hey, the reality is that some people are going to smoke marijuana. Here are some things so you don't die. Don't mix alcohol with marijuana. If you are eating an edible, do not eat excessive edibles. Start small and, see how you go, but also kind of thinking of different interventions that may be able to meet them where they are in a place of like, this is the reality of that person, and maybe making small steps to lessen that harm.
Yeah, and I also feel like it's important to already be known as a trusted resource to students. Like they know that you are a safe space, that they can let their hair down with you and be their authentic self without being judged. I think it's easier to be able to have that conversation with them and for them to be able to receive what you're actually providing them. I think is also very helpful. And I think that requires a level of transparency and vulnerability, like with your own story with students and making sure that you have the capacity and the support that you need to see them through what they're going through. Because I think sometimes we start there with resources and we don't follow up or we don't see like how they're because we're too busy or we have a lot of students, etc. But I think it's a responsibility once you share like these are some options for you to take on, even if it's religion and spirituality that we have to get meaning making, whatever package that's customized to support them in that. Being committed to see them through that, I think is important as well for them not to have a relapse or a setback.
Thank you. Thank you. So important. We have just a few minutes left, and I wanted to sort of address Israel's question on what can students do peer to peer. I mean, in my own research, I've noticed that sometimes the peer culture is not always the friendliest, right? Competitive cultures, egos, pride. So what can peers do to sort of support their other peers in this space and maybe reduce imposter syndrome?
I can start here. I think I'll just like fixate on one example of something that I have tried to be conscious of in grad school. And I think it's often a very uncomfortable thing to call out others who are making problematic statements or scenarios in which someone is um, maybe like putting someone else on the sidelines or disregarding someone's opinion and things like that. That's something that I think on like a daily level is something to be conscious of and something to, um, you know, try to address like in your one-on-one interactions. I think that is hard to do for sure, but I think especially as, you become like more confident or if you are like a leader in the space, like I think that's how culture changes is if, you sort of like let people know that that's not okay. Um, then like eventually, it's like okay to like just you make you call someone out, life continues, you still have to coexist with this person. Um, but at least like, everyone is on the same page about like, the kind of environment we want to foster. That's maybe not the most satisfying answer though. I'll let someone else speak.
Important. It's hard work, but very important to do that. Anyone want to have a last word?
The one thing I will add, one of the coolest things that I've seen a student do during one of my programs, I did a program that was geared towards women and it was open to all. There was no structure. One of the students came in and they were kind of having conversations amongst themselves, and before they left, one of them said, I think we all should exchange numbers. Can we do a group chat? And one person just lit up and said, yes, please, because I'm alone and I'm the only woman in my program. And so I was like, please, I don't know what to do. And it was beautiful to watch in that I think there's definitely, Jillian, like you mentioned, speaking up, calling out things like that is like one facet of being the change. A really amazing change is putting yourself out there. If you have the bandwidth as a student leader to be vulnerable and show up, say, hey, we're going to do a group for people who are first gen students and we're going to talk about resources. Hey, here's a book for first gen students to survive in academia. Here's the hidden curriculum. Here's a resource guide, or here's a map, and basically have something that's transferable and not necessarily something that you own. That is amazing. There are a lot of people who will go through a door and leave that door open for the people behind them. And that is success. That is people who are opening up for people who look like them, sound like them, and maybe the people who say, there's not a lot of me in the room. Let me leave the door open. And I think that's really incredible. I have like a whole book, a whole series around like stuff and resources around like first gen students or students who are, may not necessarily be in the majority on campus. And those are our main resources. I always refer people to Grad Girl Wellness on Instagram if you're on social media. She has a lot of affirmation for folks if you feel by yourself, if you feel left out. It's just a great way to have that space. And there are a lot of people who are looking for that community as well.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you for offering that to us. And we're almost at time, but I just want to say thank you to our panelists. Simone, one thing that stuck out for me is in the very beginning, you said that these are not just anxious thoughts, these are real experiences that students are having, and I think that's super important. Collaboration on campus, talk to students, be empathetic, be vulnerable. Gillian, you just reminded us that powerful small acts really do matter. And it doesn't take a whole lot of resources to just reach out to someone and remind them that you're really happy that they're there, and helping them build their confidence. And LeeAnn, you brought us back to the basics. Listen to your students, go talk to them. Don't assume that you know what they need. We have to pay attention to our students. They are, very powerful resources for us, and they can help us do our jobs better. And to meet students where they are, right? That means we're all going to be making TikToks after this. To advertise our resources right on TikTok. So I just want to thank you all again. I'm gonna turn it over to Tamika to maybe close us out of our great conversation this afternoon.
Absolutely. What an amazing panel. I want to thank you each for your contributions. You are also lively and animated, and I love an animated webinar. I appreciate all of you coming here, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today for the Command It webinar for the month of April. Please check out the chat. We have continued webinars coming up in the following months. Please make sure you look at the Command It website for all of our events. Also, the recording for today's event will be available on the Command It website. I want to thank Dr. Corina Hernandez for moderating today. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Simone. And thank you, Dr. LeeAnn Roberts, for joining us today. Your contributions are priceless. We appreciate your authenticity. And we here at Command It are just so excited to be associated and affiliated with such wonderful people who are willing to give back to the community that we address here as our Command It audience. I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. I want to thank you for always joining us and always promoting our webinars through sharing our links and our social media posts. We love as much engagement as we can possibly muster because we are making a difference. And I just want to thank everyone for all of their contributions today. Have a wonderful afternoon. Goodbye.